Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Turvey, the middle-aged revolutionary, and joining me again, as always, is my friend and comrade Terry Eaton. Terry, how are you?
Fantastic for seeing you, Jason.
And fantastic to see you too. And apologies to our fans out there in in internet land for the long period between our last triumph, which was the final part of our review of Paul Embry's book Despised. We've both been laid up with flu, chest infections, and God knows what else, but we're here now. And we're going to be talking today about the testy subject of trade unionism in Britain in 2025, because God knows there's quite a bit to talk about. Um, so we'll start with a piece of work that's been done by a comrade by the name of Max. Shout out to Max for his work on this. I'll put some graphics up on the screen so you'll have a better idea of these graphs and the figures that we're talking about here. But this piece of work that Max has done is that he's basically mined a load of data from the Office of National Statistics regarding things like trade union membership, regarding age demographic of trade unions, and all kinds of other bits. And I wanted to have a talk with you, Terry, about the facts and figures that Max has very diligently mined and put together in this very brief but very detailed and very interesting document. So um, the first graph I wanted to look at is actually the one on the front page, and like I said, I'll put the graphic up for this for everyone to see when I do the edit a bit later on. But we're looking at basically the overall number of people, workers, who have been members of trade unions since records began in 1893. So we've got figures all the way up to 2017 from the Office of National Statistics. And um, just to sort of briefly summarise, trade union membership began end of the 19th century and consistently grew. The rate of growth varied from year to year, but essentially there were two notable peaks in trade union membership. The first one, as you could probably see from the graphic, is in the post October Revolution period. So after October 1917, with the fervour that I'm sure um, grew from this world's first workers' state that was established in the Soviet Union, many people were in Britain compelled to join trade unions and perhaps be part of something similar over here. And then the membership of trade unions then went down and found its pre-war low point basically during the Depression,
Mm.
Great Depression, 1929 to 1939. And then after the Depression, we saw a largely uninterrupted climb in trade union membership between roughly 1939 to 1979. And 1979 is an important point in history because, of course, it's the election of the Margaret Thatcher Conservative government. And having done all the groundwork um, in the years from 1974 to 1979, that was the Labour government of that period. A full on attack on the working class began in earnest in 1979. And it's fair to say, and the figures bear this out, and the graphic I hope you can see on the screen also bears this out, which is that trade union membership has been on an inexorable slide since 1979. So, Terry, what are your reflections on this particular set of statistics?
Uh, Jason, I think you've said it all. It's quite clear from the statistics there. Um, and what I noticed a bit further on, I mean, I think that the decline is also from '79 because of Thatcher
Hmm.
and since Thatcher governments after, and not just Thatcher. Um, is the industrial manufacturing, the mines,
Mm.
the steel works, the heavy industry, ship building and stuff like that, they all started to go. So they're big unionized, highly paid workers. So when they start going, those figures are going to go down because they've all been made redundant.
Mm.
Um, and And so obviously between that period 79 onwards, that decline is a gradual decline as she's putting down industry after industry after industry, beginning with the miners in 83, 84. But the powers were already in there for her to do that.
Mm.
And that's what I see on that decline and the reasoning behind that right up to 2017, because we've never recovered
No, no, we haven't.
from that 80s period.
Yeah, I mean, we've said before, Terry, on previous YouTube videos we've made in the past, the peak was 1979 in terms of trade union membership. You had a decade, a class struggle, all the way through the 70s to 1979, and then obviously that was on the back of a, a number of disputes that became known as the Winter of Discontent. There was a huge effort on the part of the ruling class and their friends in the media to try to villainize the working class for basically asking for wage increases, breaking the social contract that really disintegrated in around about the mid-70s, I think it's fair to say. And Thatcher was swept to power with a promise of basically sorting the working class out once and for all. So
Yeah.
you had a membership of the trade union movement that stood at 13 million in 1979. It was the high point. It's the highest point that trade unions have ever been. And today we're talking now, Terry, with trade unions in total 6 million members.
Yeah.
So it's been an inexorable slide. And I don't know what you think about this, but I remember doing an interview quite a long time ago now with Paul Embry, whose book we reviewed triumphantly. But I remember asking Paul, do you think trade unions are managing their own decline? And he believed that they were. He believed that trade unions have been in this inexorable slide, and we're talking about now, what is that, 46 years, a 46-year slide. And it's almost been institutionalized now in the trade unions to basically what they have, they keep, not to try and recruit new members, not to go into new workplaces, not to go into new industries, but to try and protect the numbers of members that they have at best. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, totally agree. They they've lost the main big power base with the big unions. They've lost them, and instead of realizing this was happening and then trying to recruit from the jobs that were coming up in the replacement of those jobs, which there weren't many, but the point is that they didn't recruit. So that's why you have got an economy. Well, I'd say they let it slide. They sat it back and they lived on the laurels from the 79 peak, gradually going down through the 80s. We'll fight Thatcher, blah, 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 get the Tories out. But Blair comes in and does exactly the same. And in fact, introduces the very first bit of sort of legislation was the minimum wage, 98.
Yeah.
Now that comes in, and people, and you go around and say, well, I'm on, is it minimum wage? And if you look at the statistics over that I've got before, to see the different ages of the minimum wage and what it was, it's soul destroying. No one's going to join a union. They've got no one's, when everyone around them's on minimum wage, you don't know whether you've got a job in the morning. That's where the unions, they never captured youth, which they should have done, trying to get, when young people were going in these service industries and stuff like that on trading estates and on parks, like there's one by us, trading parks, retail parks.
Yeah.
I bet none of them are in union. We've said this before. These are the sorts of things, action points that maybe an industrial union meeting should say and take away as an action point to go and try and do something about that.
Mm,
I mean,
yeah.
you pick a union, obviously the union would have to be what they would be, or a general workers union. It's not doing the work for them, although we should. I suppose it is. But if you're putting over a point of view, a communist point of view, say, allied with the trade union, you get people involved that way as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I mean, the the deindustrialization of the country really accelerated under Thatcher.
Yes.
And part of that deindustrialization was obviously the destruction of the mining industry in this country, but also with it um, a real ramp down of the steel industry too. Because
No,
let's
no,
be
no
let's be
coal, no steel.
no coal, no steel. The two are intrinsically linked industries. You know, if you want to make steel, you're going to have to dig up coal because
Correct.
there's no way you can run a blast furnace on gas, and you
No,
certainly can't run it on electricity. You
no.
need coal, and I think that is one of a number of contributory factors on or as to why the number of members in trade unions fell as steeply as it did in the period sort of between 1979 and I reckon it kind of not levels out but slows down in terms of a decline in 1992ish, and that's because the industrial base of this country has been hollowed out. There's so little of our industrial base left, and we'll come on to it later on with the ratios of members in particular industries. But you're right, the unions dropped a ball, didn't they? They must have seen that the economy in this country was switching from what was a declining but still a sizable industrial sector into a service industry sector or service sector industries and a service sector economy,
It-
and did nothing.
hmm.
They did
But
nothing. They
this
didn't. They did.
is a
They just.
classic, yeah, yeah.
Sorry, go
There's
on.
a classic example to show there is absolutely no difference between the Tory party and the Labour Party because they're the only two parties that have been in power. Okay, they had a little bit of a share with the Liberals, but
Mm,
not during this period. And it was Tory or Labour, and nothing changed. The decline continued. Worse laws came in, yeah, and then you had Blair putting in the minimum wage, as we've said before. Sod the minimum wage, give us back collective bargaining. But
yeah,
but there's about it. It should be explained to people in more working class terms. You couldn't get a fag paper between the Tories and the Labour Party to all this period right up to
yeah,
the present day.
yeah.
And when you've got young people, uh, you've got an adult rate of £3.60 for an 18 to 21-year-old, and a person under 18 gets £3 for the same work in this period when it first came in '98. You think, well, no wonder. And then the Tories come along a bit later and introduce the national living wage, which they said, oh, this is a great thing, national living wage. You can't get lower than this. And I go, well, that's just the, the, the minimum wage became the maximum wage to me because nobody wants to get pay above it. And then you've got the national living wage. Why do you need these things? You've got a national living wage in from Osborne, and people go into food banks after that. So don't tell me that the national living wage you can live on because
You certainly
it's
can.
higher than what a pensioner gets. And if they can't, if people are going to food banks, how the fuck can they live on what they're giving them? You,
Exactly.
the figures go on. It just but this year from April 2025, the national living wage for over 21s is £12.21. If you're 18 to 20, you're on a tenner. If you're 16 to 17, you're on 7.55, the same as an apprentice.
Mm,
Now, 18 to 20-year-old, you're on a tenner. Christ, if I was a shop steward, well, I was, no, a bit after being 20, but I was involved in the unions. If they'd have said to a 19-year-old on the building site, you're working with him, but you're on £2 an hour less, you wouldn't be fucking working with him
no,
because the shop steward would come along and say, if he's doing that job, he's getting that money.
exactly.
It's
Yeah,
a load of bollocks.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely agree. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's actually something that is almost ingrained into workers. Certainly, workers who, like you said, work on building sites or even in the industry I work in. It doesn't matter how long you've been on the job. It doesn't matter how old or young you are. If you're doing the same job, you're paid the same.
Correct.
Absolutely 100%. That is a principle that's set from day one for people like us in the industries that we've worked in.
Correct. This
You
is,
know,
that's it.
the everything else is irrelevant. Everything else is irrelevant. It's that you do the same job, you get paid the same rate.
Yeah.
And like you said, the minimum wage has separated people by age alone. There's no other differentiation. it's solely by age, and means that people who do the same work get paid differently by virtue of their age, which is well, certainly sounds on its face to be age discriminatory.
Yes, I know.
Whether anyone could challenge that, I don't know. Whether
And
anyone
then
could
looking
comment
at
on
when you look at those figures, what is the advantage of an 18 to 21 year old going to his shop steward and saying, why is he getting paid £2 more than me an hour? And the guy says, well, they're the rules. Then
yeah,
he's going, so it's pointless being in this union, then is it?
exactly. And the other thing, of course, is, and it's something that was, it's probably more. Well, I'll give the American example because I think it serves to explain what I'm getting at. There was there was a I think it goes back about 3 years ago when workers at Amazon fulfillment centers, warehouses to the rest of us, were looking to get recognition for their members, for their union. I can't remember the state. Something's telling me it wasn't. It may have been Alabama. I'll correct it if I'm wrong, but because the trade unions over in the United States don't charge you basically a weekly rate, it's a percentage of your salary that they get, charge as subs. Amazon were very quick to be all over it like a rash and say, look, you're going to lose 2 to 2.5% of your annual salary to pay subs. When if you just come to us, we might be able to give you a pay rise without you needing to give those subs to your trade union. Now, going on your example and what you were saying about the different levels of minimum wage you get according to your age, if you're on a lower rate because of your age, your union subs are going to be not necessarily a substantial dent, but certainly a dent that you'll see in your wages. And you may find yourself, especially given the sorts of work that people who are paid these sorts of rates of pay are doing, you might find yourself saying, well, if you've even got the option of joining a union, if your union's even recognised in your workplace, and the odds are I would say they would probably not be, you've got the option of saying to yourself, well, can I afford the £12, £14, 50, whatever it is a month, when I've got all the other things I need to pay for? I've got to pay for my rent, I've got to pay for my bills, I've got to pay for my food, I've got to pay for everything else. Can I afford that 15 quid? And it's
Yes.
a tough ask. It's a tough ask of people, I think.
I mean, they assume that these days, because they've put the price of housing out of the reach of anyone who's under 25, I'd say,
Mm,
unless you've
mm,
got a really good job, you're not going to get enough training or experience by that age. That they're all still living their own, so that they're paying the parents a pittance compared to what they pay in rents, so they can well afford it. But these young people aren't stupid. They look at it and they go, "Nah, I'm not joining that," because there's no one telling them this is the way to go. Stick together like
mm.
it used to be. I mean, you didn't have to ask. You know that, Jason.
Yeah,
There
of
was no
course.
there was no asking it. When you joined a company, you joined the union.
Yeah, yep.
End of.
Yeah, that's right.
Or you didn't join the company.
Yes,
Well,
yes, that's
I know
absolutely
these are
right.
the long gone halcyon days of, but we can still dream on that it could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the closed shop came with its own issues,
Oh yeah,
um, but I think essentially compelling people to join a trade union is not in and of itself a bad thing. Um, I think it's a good way of getting people get them involved in the system very early on. As part of joining the company, you join your trade union as well. Um, I think I think I think we've lost something, not just by losing the closed shop, but this decline that's been taking place since the late 70s, um, has meant that trade unions are basically just guarding the territory they have. They're not looking to break into new industries. They're
yeah,
not looking to break into um, sometimes even employers in industries that they organise in. New employers, for instance.
yeah,
You've got you've got workers have had to start their own trade unions You know, the Independent Workers of Great Britain and United Voices of the World and places like that. People who organise things like delivery drivers and Uber drivers and people like that, because they have been completely left by the wayside by the established trade union movement, haven't they?
Yes, yeah, they have. I mean, there's nothing more that can be said.
Mm.
That the leadership of the unions are at fault. It can't be the grassroots membership because they're in decline,
Yeah.
and the people that have stayed in unions are probably in them because their company maybe is not really affected by coal and steel. I know there's a big factory down by us. There's a glass making factory, um, and they employ a lot of people, and they're on good money. Vauxhall's is still in my town,
Yeah.
you know, albeit much reduced from what it was in the 70s, but so's everything else.
Mm.
But I just
Yeah.
think, you know, I mean, there was a statistic. I think I'm not sure if he put it down. I think Max gleaned out from somewhere. He said in 1995, unionized average wage was 25% higher than non-unionized.
Yes.
In
Yes.
2021, it was 5% higher. Only a slight advantage to being in a union with regard to wages.
Yes. Well, I was going to come on to that, but why do we talk about that now? So, just to reiterate that statistic, because let's be clear, when you and I have probably both done our fair share of trade union recruitment, either by being at an induction, so that's people who've just joined the employer, and you get them all in the same room, and the recognised union send someone, and they will speak to the group and basically try and sell their union to them. And one of the things that we always would tell people is that you are financially better off being in a trade union, because trade union members earn more money than their equivalents in non-unionised workplaces.
Yeah.
And like you said, 25 years ago, unionised workers were paid 25% more than their counterparts in non-unionised workplaces. And the difference now is just 5%. 5%.
Mm.
That's it. So that once compelling argument you can make to would-be trade union members that being part of a trade union can make you 25% better off is now not true.
Gone.
It's
But
only 5%.
also, I'd say though, with that, you've got to correlate that with the fact of the higher wage earners who were all unionised in those industries that have gone, obviously push that figure down. It's not just that people have decided I'm not going to be in the union and the
Mm.
wages have been cut by 20%. It is a fact that all the miners went, the steel workers, your dock workers, reduced, and all this business, and highly unionised industry, and your oil industry as well. They're
Yeah,
all sold to
yeah,
foreign investing companies, and so obviously that you could, but basically that fact on its own, just on that, is
yeah, exactly. Well, I
shocking.
mean, obviously these were wiped out more than 25 years ago, but it is part of the decline. The print workers as well.
Yeah, the decline. Yeah.
You know, the print workers were. It was a very very highly skilled job that they did, like hot metal typesetting. It was a
Mm-hmm.
highly skilled job. I believe it was a 5 year apprenticeship to become a hot
Yeah.
metal typesetter. But the terms and conditions that you got for qualifying were extremely good. But the problem
Oh
was,
yes.
it was the same to a degree, as with other very well remunerated, highly skilled um, uh, work in highly skilled industries. The trade unions got complacent. Sogat were quite happy to look after their print workers above any and other all other considerations, and sod other workers. They were only worried about making sure that print workers were looked after and not getting print workers involved in other workers' struggles. And
Mm.
so when they came after the print workers, they were on their own.
Yeah,
And
I mean, look,
you know,
when you're saying there about the highly skilled, I mean, my a mate of mine's brothers, they were all printers in just the local paper in my town, and they were on more money than any shell worker was on,
mm,
and their
yeah,
union was
absolutely.
powerful. I mean, for a short time, I was in Sogat, but only because I worked in the paper industry, um, and a Society of Graphical and Allied Trades, and so I was in that for a brief period. But it didn't. Our wages weren't anywhere near print workers' wages. Jesus Christ, Willie made the
Yeah,
paper, but they were on colossal money. But as you say, they took their eye off the ball,
they took their eye
uh,
off the ball.
and
Yeah.
then bang, it was in the back of the net.
Again, it was that what we have, we keep attitude that trade unions have got these days. SOGAT 82 had that as well, and
What
I
was?
mean, as long as hot metal typesetting was the primary means by which newspapers were printed,
Yeah.
then the members were happy. SOGAT 82 were happy, but
What
like
was her name?
any
What was her name? The leader.
there she's Brenda Dean. So
That's
Brenda
it.
Dean,
Yeah. I
um,
was nearly there.
yeah,
I couldn't just get it.
Brenda Dean uh,
Yes.
was the general secretary, and like I said, they were very much a craft union. I
Yeah.
know it was about allied trades as well, SOGAT, but they have a very craft mentality when it comes to hot metal typesetting. And for those people who aren't old enough to remember, basically what happened in the late 80s, mid to late 80s, well, it actually started with Eddie Shah. Eddie
Him.
Shah,
Yeah.
sorry, started the Today newspaper,
Yeah.
which was the first full colour printed newspaper in this country, and it was done with what was called journalist typesetting. So instead of having hot metal typesetting machines, all the typesetting was done by the journalist that wrote the article, and so there was no need for hot metal typesetting. And when Rupert Murdoch wanted to move his printing operations from Fleet Street to what became known as Fortress Wapping, he went to war with SOGAT 82 and the hot metal typeset print workers, and they were wiped out. They were
Yeah.
absolutely wiped out. And now, well, say now, it's been for a long time. There are
Yeah.
no newspapers are printed on Fleet Street and haven't been for decades now.
Mm.
And it was the onset of technology that wiped them out. But SOGAT were not equipped to fight
No.
back.
Heads in the sand again.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, the compelling case, or what used to be a compelling case, that you earned more by being a trade union member is still true. It's just not as true as it was 25 years
No.
ago. And of course, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it doesn't help
Oh,
where you
I
have,
get that all the time.
well, yeah, but it's a point that needs to be reiterated again and again. 2023 saw three major trade union collapses.
Yes.
You had the Royal Mail strike with the CWU basically sold their members out because they were worried that Royal Mail were going to administration, and that's been admitted by their deputy general secretary. You had the the National Education Union marched their members to the top of the hill and marching back down again over a pay dispute. And
Yeah.
then when the pay dispute was settled, teachers did get a bigger pay rise than they were originally given, but it had to come from the teachers or the school's own budget. There was no extra money to pay them. And then finally, of course, you had the Royal College of Nurses, who
Yeah.
in April of 2023 accepted a deal, put it to their members. The members rejected it. Then they had to get a ballot. But by then, a lot of the momentum had gone out of the dispute. And so essentially, the RCN accepted the deal that had been rejected a few months previous. So, you know, it's when you've got unions like that, it's little wonder that they're only earning roughly 5% more than their non-unionised counterparts.
Yeah.
Especially like say about the Royal Mail dispute. Royal Mail, the CWU turned down a Royal Mail pay offer only to accept the same offer 8 months later with a few
Yeah. Well, that's
bells and whistles
ridiculous.
attached.
Yeah. Ridiculous. But the Ermine cloak will soon be forthcoming for what's his face,
I'm
Dave
sure it will.
Ward.
Yes, it'll be Baron Ward of Summer or other. It'll be
Oh, Baron Ward
Baron
of
Ward of
Lambeth then.
Lambeth.
He'd be able to
Exactly.
do the Lambeth walk
Yes, exactly.
like they did walking away from the picket lines.
Yeah, exactly. So, um, let's move on then to this set of statistics, because the next graph just below, and again I'll put the graphic up so people know what we're talking about. It talks about trade union membership as a percentage of its employees. So, trade union members in Great Britain as a proportion of employees has seen a steady decline from around 39% in 1989 to just under 23% in 2021. And I dare say it's continuing to go down. So the footprint that trade unionism has on the world of work in this country, and there's something like 30 million workers in this country, but the footprint is getting smaller and smaller, isn't it?
It is. It is, most definitely.
And
Yeah.
again, it's I hesitate to kick unions while they're down, but they're not exactly coming up with plans to try to even stop the slide, let alone put
No, they just fight
into
fires.
growth. No idea. They don't seem to know how to do it.
No, because they're not they're not proactive, are they? They're just and they haven't been for a long time. They wait for the government or a company to decide to do something, and then they'll react to that. Now, whether that reacts with a dispute, whatever. But it seems to me that people, say for argument's sake, the posties, which is something more nearer to me, um, they ask them now in the future for a strike. They'll be lucky to get one, very lucky. And the company must know, this Polish guy who's took it over
mm,
must know that he can give in all he wants at the beginning to get his own way, but he'll do everything in the next 5 years to claw back everything he's agreed with Dave Ward now, and Dave Ward will be gone in 5 years.
mm.
Some other poor sap will be in the position of trying to renegotiate an agreement that has been reneged on by management, but the members are unwilling to go on strike because the state of the situation is now they've got rid of older workers, which is another reason why that figure is down as well. Because a lot of older experienced workers, they want them out because they're too used to the ways of doing the job and they won't change. And so they want young people in that they can manipulate, which is all the more reason why you should have a strong union
Yes,
to stop
absolutely.
them manipulating these people, because that in turn affects the terms and conditions of every postie in the country. I look at them now, they're posties walking around here at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, evening.
Yep, yep, exactly.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. So, uh, just to bring people up to speed, it's a chap called Daniel Kretinsky, who's a Czech billionaire.
Yes, he is.
And I wrote an article. Let's think, where are we? 16th of May last year, about the sale of Royal Mail.
Yeah,
Obviously, Mr. Kretinsky was nothing if not an opportunity. He saw an opportunity to go in and seize control of that company when industrial unrest was at a low point because the CWU had not long collapsed. Um, the ink was dry on that deal, and the managers at Royal Mail were already reneging on it, like you
correct.
said.
Yeah,
Um, so at the time I wrote that article, it said he'd made a second offer to Royal Mail, valuing the company at around £3.5 billion. But like you said, the problem is that um, uh, there would be an opportunity for the CW to try and organise its workers to try and get the best, whether or not they can stop Mr. Kretinsky buying it outright is one thing, but one thing they could certainly do is make it very, very clear that that he would not be buying a compliant workforce. He would be buying a workforce that would be absolutely steadfast in defending everything that it's got and actually will be asking for more in the future. Instead of which, the CWU strike collapsed in around about June of 2023.
yeah.
They lost members hand over fist. I still understand, and you might know this better than me, but there's still a campaign group within the CWU membership about what happened in 2023, trying to point out some of the failings of the
Well,
CWU
there's
leadership.
probably still, just to interrupt you, there's probably still activists who've got sacked and never got the job back
Yes, yes, that's right.
that
Yes,
people have
because
been fighting for. And
people like
this,
those people were right. So the CWU accepted a deal that included that they would review those sackings, not reinstate those people.
mm,
So instead of saying no, 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 we want every single member that was sacked reinstated,
correct,
arguably
which
with
what,
their pay reinstated as well, their back pay and everything else.
yeah,
But instead of which they handed it over to I believe it was a lord or a baron who was going to look at it
Oh, I
for.
can't think of his name offhand.
Yeah, I'm just looking through
You'll
my
have to
article to
remind
see if
me.
I can find it, and I can't. I know for a fact that's what they were going to do. They were going to
Yeah,
hand
and
it
we knew
over
for a
to.
fact where that decision would land, didn't we?
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I
He who
mean,
pays the piper calls the tune, and
exactly,
that's
exactly.
exactly what happened. Um, yeah, there's still a campaign, posties say no, and they're still active. But it's like if your union leadership are the ones that are going on TV, it's the average postman that's listening to them and then saying, "Well, you lied to us last time.
Yes,
Why should I
yeah.
take any notice of what you're telling us now? We're going to get
Well,
the
this
best
is
deal
it.
possible for you." You said that 2 years ago, and we were shafted. And now we've got agreements in offices that we didn't want, split
Yes,
rounds. Well, you won't know what that is, but it's self-explanatory. Splitting rounds in half and doing half on a Monday and Tuesday, and then doing the other half on a Wednesday and Thursday. That's why you don't see your postman every day.
yeah,
They
yeah,
didn't want that. The postman didn't want that. It
mm,
causes this disruption.
yes, of
You're not
course.
on your regular duty and things. It's not progress. People say to me when I argue about the postman, they go, "Oh well, you know, you've got to look at progress." And I said, "Well, do you know anything about delivering letters?" And they go, "Well, no." So well, when I was a kid, did you see your postman in the morning when you were going to school when you were chill? Yeah, yeah. Do you see him now when your kids are going to school? No, no. Where is he? He's still in the office sorting mail from 2 days
Yeah,
ago.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, I
And
mean
them
the
dickheads who
fundamental.
run the union knew all that in
Absolutely,
every
yeah,
office. So why did you do something about it 5 years ago? Or
yeah,
even more when I was still working for them? Because it was
yeah,
the start of
exactly.
it when I left. It
Mm,
was just starting to creep in. But
yeah.
now it's rampant. Once they get a foothold in, these managers and owners, they'll just crush you.
Well, yeah, and they'll certainly crush you if the workers are demoralised by the actions of their own trade union.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't think, off the top of my head, if you've got an idea, obviously put it in the comments below this video, but I can't think of a contemporary example of a union being handed such a big mandate by their members and then collapsing so readily. I mean, bearing in mind it was in December 2022, they obviously, because of the anti-trade union laws, they had to reballot their members every 6 months. They reballoted their members and they were given a 90% mandate in favour of strike action. And then, and again, I sound like a broken record, but I can say this word for word now, that in 2023, they didn't take a single day of strike action. Not
Correct.
one. Nothing. And then accepted a deal that was largely the same as the one that its members had rejected in December 2022, with a few little bells and whistles in it and a few little tweaks to the attendance procedure that Royal Mail were prepared to concede on. But otherwise, it was substantially the same. So all these
Yep.
members had lost all this money going on strike to come out of it at the other end with a deal exactly the same as the one they'd rejected something like 7 months previous.
Yeah.
Now, well, if you're a
Ridiculous.
worker in Royal Mail, having had that happen, even if you were to try and take on Mr. Kretinsky and his buyout of Royal Mail, are you really going to listen to people like Dave Ward? Are you
No,
really
are
going
you
to?
hell?
Exactly, exactly. And it makes the workers at Royal Mail easy pickings for someone like Mr. Kretinsky because he
Mm.
knows that if he does come after terms and conditions, which he will, there's not going to be much there to push back against.
Yeah, the worrying thing for them was the pension funds. You see,
Yes,
that was the worrying thing with him. And I suppose, but it's like we've said all the time. How can you take a guarantee of that they're not going to kill you? Off a snake. If if a if if they say, "Don't worry," when a manager used to say to me, "Don't worry," I always worried that something was going to happen that he was telling me wasn't going to happen, and act
yeah,
accordingly. Don't. Nobody should sit back and trust anything that any management of any company ever says, in
yes,
my view. And that's going back as a shop steward, a young man in my early 20s. From that day till this, I don't believe a word that comes out of a manager's mouth because he's there
yeah,
to do the company's bidding. And if he can do you
absolutely.
down to get it done, he will do you down.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
sadly, there's kids in the position nowadays that they might have a dad who was militant, maybe in the
Mm,
mines or the docks or something, who looks up to his dad and he wants to you know emulate him. So he wants to be a shop steward, and then he's banging his head against the wall like it's what have I done here?
yeah, exactly.
Jesus, I feel
Exactly.
sorry for him.
Yeah, so do I. And I think that statistic, or those statistics rather, that table that shows the again, I suppose it just buttresses the previous set of statistics regarding just general trade union membership. Not only is the number of people organised in trade unions declining, the percentage of employees who are trade union members is declining too, and
Yeah,
it's it's just a sign of, if you needed any more signs, that the trade unions as a collective are, as Paul Embry said, managing their own decline.
yeah, yeah. He's right.
They're literally servicing their own demise. They know it's coming. They know, I mean, they will come to a, I mean, let's be honest, you look at Unite. I mean, if you was to try and untangle how many trade unions form Unite, not all at once, but over a course of many decades, um, I mean, I
Yeah.
think if it might still be there. If you go into the foyer at Unite's head office in London, on the wall are these little plaques of all the unions that eventually became Unite. And there's dozens of them. There's
Mm.
literally dozens of these little unions. So that's I'm not saying trade unions shouldn't merge, but I don't think that unions are better for merging. I think it's
No.
very, very difficult to think of an example of a union that merged and was a better union for doing that.
Well, they
Um,
lose their identity for one, don't they? But if
Absolutely,
say for
yeah, yeah,
argument's sake, you'd have got the AEU or
yeah,
the hated EEETPU,
yes,
and they take on a pipe fitters job, a GMB or a pipe fitters union.
mm,
There's no longer a pipe fitter. He's then a general worker within the electricians union.
exactly,
He
yeah,
hasn't got an identity. And that's where the
yeah,
demarcation lines that we used to have were drawn. You would not get an electrician touching a welding rod.
yeah.
Whereas now they want you to be all singing and all dancing. You can do
Well, that's
everything.
it. Yeah, exactly. And the number of unions that have, I mean, I'm not picking on Unite when I say this, but Unite is a good
Please
example because
do
it's
pick on them.
all right. Okay, I'll pick on Unite then. But it's a general union. So, um, if you're a small union looking to merge, or you're a union that's on its uppers and looking to merge, Unite's often the first one you'll look at because it is a general union. But if you look at the unions, especially in more recent times, BA, BASA they were called, the British Airways Stewards and Stewardesses Association, merged
Yeah.
into Unite and has lost its identity. And of course, the UCAT was
Oh Christ,
merged
yeah,
into Unite and lost its identity. BIFU, the
yeah. Finance
the
union,
Banking,
banking,
Insurance and Finance Union,
finance union.
that got merged into Unite and largely disappeared. And then, speaking from a transport workers' point of view, there was a very, very small union because the British Transport Officers Guild was merged into Unite and disappeared off the face of the earth.
Yeah. Hmm.
Because that's an inevitability when you merge from a small union, especially the British Transport Officers Guild. Goodness me,
Yeah,
they were people who negotiate. Generally, that was people who negotiated their own salaries. So you can imagine the sort of roles that they would do. They were merged into Unite and poof, disappeared in a puff of smoke.
yeah, gone.
You
Yeah,
know,
because they are a general workers. Well, it was basically transport and general workers union. So transport and
mm,
general workers. So
yeah,
the general workers take up the majority of things. So if say the workers in the oil industry, Shell, um, Burma, oil, Mobil, BP, if all those workers one time decided that they were going to go on strike over a pay deal, because we all got paid the same pay in each industry. In the oil industry, you didn't negotiate together, but you all ended up getting, if it was 5% Shell got, that's what you got basically. Um, and so obviously terms and conditions might be different depending where you work, shift pay and stuff like that. But so if but you were, because you were a general worker, you weren't in the majority, so you did have a big sway. But if you were somebody like you've said, um, well, like yeah, Biff, not Biff, the other example you used. So you just vanish.
Yeah,
If you had a grievance or a complaint, no one's going to
yeah,
bother their arse
exactly.
about you.
I'm going to look at this next one. I'm going to again put this graphic up on the screen. So this is a quite interesting one. This is TU membership as a proportion of employees by age group. So hopefully my cut and paste and putting it on screen now has worked. And if it has worked, what you'll see is a graph. So there are three different color lines. So we've got the blue line representing the percentage of the proportion of employees by age group in 2007. The red one is the same percentage but in 2014. And the yellow line that you can see there is 2021. And what's stark is you can see roughly the three curves, the three lines have got the same rough shape. So the percentage of people who are members of trade unions are predominantly in the sort of 40 to 59 age group, roughly. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But what's stark is if you look at the yellow line, where the yellow line drops off at the very end, age bands over 70 is still almost 20% of TU membership. So 20% of TU members are almost 20 are 70 plus,
I've got an answer to
70
that.
years age and plus. So there's a number of questions that raises because I know because I was a member of a trade union that for many years that was predominantly run by retired people, where every divisional council or most divisional councils, sorry, most branches and most delegates at conference were retired people, or at least a sizable number of them were retired. I
Yeah.
wouldn't say most, actually, that's not fair, but has a sizable cohort of retirees. And this particular chart shows that, and part of this could be the liberalisation of retirement, allowing people to retire or to work much later in their lives if they want to do so. Not compulsion on them to retire. That is
Mm.
probably a big part of this.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think, the fact it goes back to something you were saying much earlier, which is that the trade unions haven't targeted young members for quite a long time, have they?
No, they haven't. No, they haven't. I mean, that statistic about the age, you've only got to walk to your local Asda or Morrison's, and there's a guy or two guys maybe on the thing who are well past their retirement date, who've decided to go back to work and that because they can't survive on the bloody pension.
Mm,
So they
yeah.
go back to work. He's probably the idea of working all your life is to retire when you get your pension and be able to live. But they can't, so they have to go back to work.
Yeah.
Harrison thought I'll ever have to go back to work because I won't be able to do it.
Mm,
There you go. I've no intentions of going back to work.
yeah.
I just have to
Yeah.
survive. But that's why you do. And so maybe there's a lot in all places around the country, in every Asda, every Morrison's, every Sainsbury's. There's older people who are still in the mindset of being in a union. They've probably continued the subs as retired members of that union, i.e., Unite Community, they might have joined when they retired, and they've stayed in that. Which I'm a member of that for me sins, but it just keeps me in touch with a couple of them. But they're all old guys. The Trades Council are all old.
Yeah.
No young
Yeah.
people on it.
Exactly. Yeah.
In
Yeah.
fact, some of the Trades Council are retired, like you say.
Absolutely. And like I said, I mean, full disclosure, I'm 51 myself. I'm no spring chicken, but I know in my former union there were many branches that were run almost exclusively by and for retired people.
Mm.
Um, there were, I mean, I remember going to a divisional council meeting. I went to it more than once as well. Used to meet on a Saturday, early afternoon on a Saturday in a pub in Gray's Inn Road in London. Um, and most of the attendees were retired people,
Mm.
and they You know, if that's what they want to do, of course, there's no problem with that in my view. But these people were seeing it more as a social. It's a case of
Yeah,
keeping in touch with the job that they had, keeping in touch sometimes with the people they used to work with, which is fine. Wasn't a lot of organisation going there though, going on there. Not
no,
a
because
lot
they
of
just
work.
want to go, they'll have a chat and go and piss.
Go on, yeah, go to this pub. Have a few pints, go upstairs, hammer the buffet, and then talk about a few bits and bobs. Go back downstairs, back on the piss all afternoon, and that was
Yeah,
basically
but that's
it.
it. It's old revolutionaries stuck together. Never mind middle-aged
Yeah,
revolutionaries.
exactly. Quite right too. But
Us old
but no, it's
revolutionaries stick together.
yeah, exactly. But the question is, and it's a prickly one. But can a union survive being run by retired people?
No, I wouldn't have thought so.
Can it? I mean, one of the things, I've said this before, say it again. The number of times that you come up against a branch where the chair was retired, the secretary was retired, the vice secretary was retired, and so on, and they all would say the same thing. Well, we give up the place for a younger person if only one would come forward. But the younger person sees a person who's been in that position for 20 odd years, has never been willing to give it up, and has never been blasted out of it by someone coming along and standing against them.
Yeah,
Why would they try and hoik you out? Why would they?
mm.
When they get things into balance, and they realise there are probably another half a dozen better things to do with their time than go to branch meetings and chair them, let the old guy stay there, because
Yeah,
God knows it's going to be a bloody job to get him out unless he walks off of his own accord. And this is the problem I mean, it's not all trade unions, of course. Some are very active and vibrant, and the people that run them are workers.
mm.
But I think this is a demonstration of the direction of travel. I mean, by way of another example, I was doing some research a little while back on the disgusting Composite 21 that the TUC passed in October 2023, basically putting it fully in lockstep with Western imperialism over Ukraine. And I found myself like scrubbing all the way through the video to try and find that particular debate. And because God knows I wouldn't sit through that bloody rubbish for 2 or 3 hours, but I was scrolling through, and obviously you're seeing all these faces popping up who take the rostrum. And the thing that struck me, and bearing in mind this is only 18 months or so ago, was uh, how the average age of the speakers
Mm.
was so relatively high. There was older people generally going to the rostrum
Yeah,
and
yeah,
speaking.
yeah.
There was very few young people going to them. That's not to say that there weren't young people in the delegations,
Mm.
but none of them were getting a crack at speaking, or very few of them.
Mm.
And you if you were to be, let's say, an alien come down from outer space, you'd think the TUC was basically just a collective of older people.
Yeah, well, you would exactly.
And again, this is something the trade
That's the
unions,
old guard.
yeah, it is very much so. And
They
it's
don't
again
want.
the trade unions have seen this coming a mile off and haven't done anything about it.
Yeah, they don't want young. They're not encouraging young to come through because they maintain their cushy little position with their expenses and the little position that they have. They don't want to see some young fella at 20 odd who's got vision and wants to
Mm,
do something. They don't want that. No, 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 no. You just get in your box. We'll run this. We know better than you, sort of
yeah,
attitude. And
yeah,
that's how it'll go until the demise of the totally unions are totally finished.
yeah, absolutely. And the idea that going to TUC and speaking at the rostrum is somehow a badge of honour. Believe me, I've been to TUC. I went in 2015. Swore blind I'd never go again. It is a 3.5 day procession. There is no debate. There is no discussions. It is literally,
Mm.
you go up, you make a speech, there's a show of hands, everyone votes for it, and you move on to the next motion. And the only time it kicks off is when the trades councils tried to get more seats at Congress.
Yeah,
And all the unions say no, the trades councils say yes, but the trades councils get voted down.
yeah. I
That's the
know.
only
Every
time
time
there's a debate. They
they're
always
always
have
on
it
about
again.
it in our local trades
Yeah,
council. Come every TUC. We've got to get more seats on the on the trade
More,
on the
we need more. We
TUC.
need more seats. We need more seats, and the trade unions won't have any of it. But other than that, it is a dull, boring, dry procession where the same motions are not debated. There's no debate. There is no debate. There's someone comes up and speaks, someone comes up and seconds, it's voted, it's always carried. Move on. You know, I'll say this before we move on to the next part of these statistics. I would encourage anyone who's in a trade union to put through their branch that their union makes it a policy to disband the TUC, because the TUC is the biggest bunch of feckless, useless individuals that I think has ever been cobbled together in the history of mankind.
Absolutely.
Honestly, absolutely useless. And I've said before, if there's one thing all trade unionists, I mean active trade unionists, I don't mean necessarily just rank and file. I'm talking about active trade union members. If there's one thing we can all agree on, we can't see the point of the TUC.
No,
We all know the TUC is a complete waste of time. So if you
absolutely.
want help, write to me. I'll put my email address in the link in the description to this video. If you want to write a motion to call on your union to have as a policy the disbandment of the TUC, you write to me. I hope you write the motion. They're that bad. They are that bad. But anyway, before we go any more off
Yeah,
topic,
great stuff.
I'll just close on this final statistic, and I won't put this up on screen because it's just basically a load of numbers. But what Max has done is he's looked at the actual total number of members, trade union members, organised by industry. So he's taken two milestones, one 1995 and one 2021. And the first one that leaps out at me is manufacturing. So in 1995, 1.45 million workers in manufacturing were organised in trade unions. In 2021, it was 349,000 workers.
Yeah.
So that's gone down by 75%. In fact, it's more than 75%.
Yeah.
So there's been not only an inexorable decline in trade union members in manufacturing, but I dare say an inexorable decline in manufacturing full stop.
Yes. Yes. That's it. It explains it. That was the figure that stuck out at me. But it's the figure I looked for, to be honest, to back up what I was thinking in the earlier debate we had. When I was looking at the figures, I thought, well, there's got to be something in here that shows manufacturing massively declined over these years. And there it was, bang, right in front of my eyes.
Yes.
So it was what I was looking for, and I found it, and that was it. There are a few others that went down, but you'd expect, but not to the extent of manufacturing.
No.
I mean, construction went down. Construction went down by over 50% because they don't build anything.
Yes, that's right.
Repair of motor vehicle, that's gone up because nobody can afford to buy a new car.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've got more people fixing cars in garages. Well, it's all, these things, when they do these statistics, people go, oh, statistics are a load of shite. But I said, well, sometimes you can see in things. I know they're boring, but if you can see there now, that one thing, why has that gone up? And the answer is because not as many new cars are being bought. Well, it must be.
Yeah, exactly.
Little things like that stick out to you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I suppose the reason why manufacturing and but someone might ask for sake of argument, well, why does losing so many trade union members in manufacturing mean anything? It's because people who work in manufacturing have their hands on the levers of power because they're closer to the movement of money, because they're making things, commodities to be sold. If they withdraw their labour, they will have an impact on the movement of money, the movement of capital. That's not to say that people who do other work are not as important. Of course, we're not saying that. But what we're saying is that if we take, let's say, for example, from the figures here, the decline in the number of trade union members in manufacturing to the growth in members in education. So we've seen from these figures in 1995, the total number of members of a trade union working in education stood at just over 1 million. It's now just over 1.6 million. Okay. So that's a 60% jump. But which of those two groups, manufacturing and education, which of those two groups is closer to the movement of money?
Exactly.
It's manufacturing.
Yeah, it's the same. You could argue with human health and social work activities. That's gone up by the same,
Yes.
not as much, but it's gone up because you've seen um, so care facilities and stuff
Yeah.
like that
Yeah.
increasing. But as you say, they don't have, there's no profit to it. Even though I know they say in hospitals they should make a profit, but I don't know how healthcare should make a profit. To be honest, I've never
Well,
got that.
I mean, if you're talking about human
Or
health and social
education.
work, I mean, there's obviously a lot of peripheral
Yeah, but
activities
education
going
is
on.
if you took education for argument's sake, education is from you go to an infant school at whatever age they do now, fucking one, and then you leave at whatever age they are, and
Yeah.
that's education, and then you've got university education, etc., and that's gone up because more people, young people who can't get work, are going to university,
Yes.
or they're being kept on at school till they're 18,
Mm,
and they either then go to university or they get a job. And the only reason they can leave school at 16 is if they've got a job.
yes.
So there's your increase in education. So
Yes.
there's always an answer why these statistics are there. But you're right, the manufacturing one is quite glaring because it's
Yeah.
what I actually looked for in the figures.
Yes. And the reason why it matters is because the workforce, the unionized workforce in 1995 was industrially stronger than it is in 2021 by dint of the fact that the number of people who are working in industries where they actually have an impact on the movement of money is much lower in 2021 than it was in 1995.
Correct.
So even if for sake of argument, even if we were to say that the number of people in trade unions in 1995 and 2021 didn't change, it did, it went down. But if we were to say they were the same, they're still weaker in 2021 than they were in 1995 because they've moved in across industries, and now they work in industries where they are less powerful.
Yeah.
You know, um, schools going on, schools closing because the teachers have gone on strike has an impact. It has an impact on working people because part of their support network, part of the thing, or part of the circle of people and circle of things around them that look after their children when they work are schools.
Hmm.
So schools closing down does have an impact, but it's absolutely nothing like the impact the manufacturing workers have when they down tools and walk out.
Yes.
It's as simple as that,
Which is
you know.
why they can just laugh at the nurses.
Yes, and do laugh at the nurses
Exactly.
frequently, because they are they are even further removed from the movement of capital than education workers are. You know,
Hmm.
education workers arguably have a peripheral or a tenuous connection to the
Hmm.
movement of money because they're part of working people's support network. But
Yeah.
nurses are even further away. Health workers are even further away. Arguably, care workers are even further away. You know,
Yes.
um, and therein lies the problem. Therein, one of the problems that the trade union movement has got in 2025, which is that it's organising in industries where the movement of money, or they're organising less members in the movement of money, or
Hmm.
in the creation and movement of capital, I should say. You know, and unless something is done, I mean, partly, and Comrade Alex has said that on his live streams recently about, you've got Trump proclaiming that he can reindustrialize in the United States. Um, the government over here hinting it's going to try and reindustrialize, basically to make bombs to drop in Ukraine more than anything else. But um, the problem is that when you re-establish an industrial base, you also reinstate to a degree working class power in those particular industries, don't you?
Yes, you do. Well, you'd think you would.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, before we move on to the next item on the agenda, Terry, was there anything else you wanted to say on these statistics?
No, I'm happy. Um,
Good.
yeah, just a reminder the point that the overall change has been from highly paid unionized work to low paid non-unionized work with 0 hour contracts. And it's obvious that capitalism cannot survive if they can't even afford to pay their workers to live enough money to live without having to go to a food bank.
Yeah,
Now, if
yeah,
that's the case, then what when they talk about Marx talks about just feeding your workers just enough to make them survive because you need them to work. You need them to work. They're obviously not bothered in Britain
mm,
by the amount of people I know go to food banks and
yes,
work.
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
So that's just my view on the decline of trade unionism.
yeah. I totally agree. I totally agree. All right, let's move on. We're
Indeed.
going to talk, albeit briefly. Let's talk about trade unions and Ukraine. Um, I wrote an article a few weeks ago, a couple of weeks ago now, on the TUC being in complete lockstep with
You
imperialism,
did.
and I make reference to a rally, if you can call it that, that took place on the 22nd of February in London, where John McDonnell obviously spoke, because he always bloody does at these things, and it was called Russian Troops Out Solidarity with Ukraine. And um, I was I was drawn to this because obviously around about that time, building up to this event, which the TUC sponsored alongside the PCS, the GMB Union, ASLEF, and the National Union of Mine Workers, which has a total of 126 members the last time I checked. Oh, and Unison as well, lest we forget, in being in lockstep with imperialists. But yeah, we had this rally, and the TUC, sorry, the TUC's General Secretary Paul Novak posted a video on X where he described the invasion of Ukraine as all out, and he also described it as illegal. Um, and obviously, anyone who's got half a brain would know if the Russians had actually carried out an all-out invasion of Ukraine, they'd be taking tea in Kiev by now. In
Easily.
fact, they've been taking tea in Kiev months ago. Um, but it was a particularly disgusting video by soon to be Baron Novak of Birkenhead or whatever. Um, but it was a pretty shameless display by the TUC and by, PCS, GMB. PCS, I would not be surprised that they are absolutely dominated by Trotskyites at their very highest level. So for them to be in lockstep with imperialism should surprise nobody. But one thing I will say is that in 2022, 9th of April 2022, in fact, a similar rally was organised by the trade unions, uh, including PCS again, GMB, National Union of Mine Workers, ASLEF, ASLEF, who
Usual
are never,
suspects.
ASLEF, I need to say, the Associated Society of Locomotive Engineers and Firemen, a good union for their members, but you're absolutely piss poor on politics. Absolutely dreadful. Absolutely dreadful on Ukraine. You are dreadful on your position on sex work or prostitution, as it should be called. Um, really, really bad politically, ASLEF. Now, in 2022, the Communication Workers Union made an appearance, but they didn't make an appearance in February 22nd, 2025. And the same goes for the BFAWU, that's the British Food and Allied Workers Union. They were at that rally in 2022, but they weren't the one in 2025. Neither were the UCU, which were there in 2022, and my old union TSSA, the Transport Salaried Staffs Association. So there were less unions in 2025 to 2022. But Terry, I wanted to get your take on this about the left in general, but specifically the TUC and the trade unions' position on Ukraine.
Well, it's
What's your
pathetic,
take?
absolutely pathetic. Uh, you, you, they should be defending. Yeah, I agree. They should be defending workers in the Ukraine. Trade union workers in the Ukraine have been attacked by the government, but that it goes back to historically from before 2014 when they burned those people in Odessa.
Yeah.
They were trade unionists.
Yes.
Now, do they forget them? And and by backing Ukraine in this ridiculous scenario of a war, they can't win. It's impossible. They cannot win it.
Mm,
It just they just increase the death of working class Ukrainians. Now, if our trade union leaders and our great founding fathers of the TUC, along with John MacDonald, who's
mm,
probably arguably one of the biggest arseholes I've ever heard speak in my life,
hmm
um, and Novak, I've got no time for him at all anyway.
no.
I think he's just a scurrilous piece of crap. But John MacDonald should know better. But we know he's a Trotskyite, so he's going to say this. It's just to me, it's a historical thing. It's we must hate Russia because Russia they're thick as shit.
Mm,
They're not even communist anymore. And these people argue the communists are taking over Ukraine. I said, where's this happening? Putin is not a communist.
no.
There is a communist party. But if you want to keep going on about let's get rid of Putin, all the unions go, then who would you have to take his place? It'd be the fucking Communist Party. Because they're the
Mm,
next biggest group in Russia, aren't they?
yeah.
So, but as regards their view, and I don't advocate support of Ukraine, only support of Ukrainian workers. That's who I feel sorry for, because these are, by agreeing all this, they continue with the war that they've got.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the trade unions, right? So let's go back in time. As you said, you mentioned the fire at the trade union hall in Odessa in
Yeah.
2014, in which it's reckoned something in the region of 42 people were killed. The TUC at their congress in 2014 carried an emergency motion that was put in by the RMT. It was quite woolly and it's quite wishy-washy in its language, I suppose, but it did say that the TUC expresses its concern at what was happening because it was all kicking off, obviously, as we know, in 2014, the
Yeah.
Maidan coup, which was backed by the West in order to overthrow the elected president of Ukraine, and there was serious, well, civil war would not be too light a term to describe what happened in those areas of eastern Ukraine following the Maidan coup. So TUC passes an emergency motion. It says nothing more about the destruction of the trade union hall in Odessa. It also doesn't say anything about the actions of the Azov battalion, a Nazi battalion in Ukraine from Western Ukraine. It said nothing, getting into more contemporary ground now. It has said nothing about Zelensky cancelling his own election. He should have had an
Yeah.
election a year ago and he still hasn't done it. They have said nothing about him banning trade unions. He has said nothing about destroying, or they have said nothing, sorry, about destroying collective bargaining agreements, about oppressing opposition parties and all sorts of things. But like you said, where they have a chance to have a dig at Russia, they're all in on it.
Yeah.
Now, I actually think, and I don't know what you think about this theory, but it just popped in my head the other day. But I wonder if, for a lot of people in the trade union movement, this conflict that's taking place in Ukraine right now, to some people, is their 2003 moment. And by that I mean, obviously we saw the huge movement that was born in 2003 through the illegal invasion, the actual illegal invasion of Iraq, by the United States and Britain and others. And the trade union movement, I wouldn't say, I was going to say mobilised, but mobilised probably is too strong a word. They sort of got up and did a bit.
Yeah.
And obviously, we had 2 million people on the streets of London protesting against it. We had Stop War Coalition and all those other things. And in the end, all Tony Blair had to do was say, yeah, I've observed what you've done. I've seen what you've all done. Now, sod off, I'm doing it anyway. And the trade unions, Stop the War Coalition and the broader left had no answer. They had no answer.
No, they never do.
No, they had no answer. They just went home. But I wonder if there were people that were possibly too young in 2003 to remember what 2003 was all about, and have attached themselves to this thinking it was the same as that. And I also wonder how many people were old enough to remember 2003 and think that this is the same because they don't understand what imperialism is. I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but I'm struggling to try and find an answer to why the trade union movement, almost to a man and a woman, has decided to fall all in on this on the side
I don't
of
get that bit.
Western
Only
imperialism.
sorry, that bit, the leadership, I do get, because the ruling class wanted the breakup of the breakup of Russia. They already got the Soviet Union gone. Now let's go the next step. And they thought they were going to get it, and they didn't. And they've something else they've misjudged, i.e., same as Brexit. So they've had to backpedal now. Now they're turning around and saying, so all the union leaders do as they all do. Starmer and all the union leaders are all the same. Oh, we must back Ukraine. But in their subconscious, historically, it's a hatred of Russia. It's an innate something in them that tells them that Russia is the bad guy. Listen, Jason, I stood on a platform in 1973 talking about a wage deal. And a guy shouted up to me, 73, bear in mind, and a guy shouted up to me. He said, I don't know why you just don't go and live in fucking Moscow. I said, well, why would I want to go and do that when I want to change society in Britain, with what we do with the union? Well, it just sounds like you're Russian. So have you got anything against the Russians? Do I sound like a fucking Russian? But that's, to me, it's traditional here. You're nothing but a fucking commie. You're red. I don't think they've studied their history. They haven't been shown their history at school. They do not teach them that the Red Army saved us anyway in the Second World War.
Yeah.
They don't teach them that. They certainly don't teach the Yanks. The Yanks don't think the Second World War started till 1942.
Yeah, exactly.
They think, we were just pissing in the wind till then. And then after Pearl Harbor, was it? And then that's when the war started. But that's by the by. I just think it's something inside thing in them that gives them this hatred of Russia. And I just don't get round. It's irrational because it's not the Soviet Union. I could understand them hating the Soviet Union because they've been bombarded from school with Orwell and other people of his ilk telling them, same at my school, telling us that 1984, this is Russia, the book's about Russia, and all this came. And I went to a grammar school, and they still didn't know history. And I just don't think people learn the history. The trade unions should teach trade unionists the history, as you said, of what imperialism is and what the Russian Federation stands for, as opposed to the Soviet Union, which we all know. But they can't get their head away from the Cold War. And you keep hearing it popped up. And I made a comment the other day about it. I think you saw it. They made a comment about, they killed the Skripals. They attacked the Skripals. And I said, yeah, with a deadly vaccine, but they're still alive and living happy.
That's right. Yes. Yes.
It's lies.
They didn't have a day off sick. Yeah. Yeah.
But because it's Russian, and then the Russians are back in Syria. Now the Syria falls, it's the Russians' fucking fault.
Yeah.
Something Alex said a while ago, and I thought about this as well, and it's a good argument to use. And you think about things and you forget them. And then he said this, and he brought it back to me what I'd thought about in the past, is that you say to people, do you believe what Keir Starmer's telling you is true? No, he's a lying gobshite. Right. Well, why do you believe what he's telling you is true about Russia? If he's a lying
Exactly.
gobshite, why is what he says about Russia true, but what
Yeah.
he says about everything else untrue? Answer
Yeah.
that,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
they've got no answer. It's a good
Yeah.
way of trying to put it over. But as regards I just think, honestly, what I've said, it's an innate hatred of anything Russian,
Mm.
and they
Well, I
don't
mean,
understand.
yeah. There's two things I think I'd say. Firstly, we're not saying for a second that Russia is a communist country. The Soviet
No,
Union was a communist country, but Russia isn't.
yes,
But it is, I think, true to say that particularly in the last 70 years, trade unions have been anti-communist, rabidly anti-communist.
yeah,
Probably since 1956, I think it's fair to say. If you look at the history of trade
that's be
unions,
from the British Road to Socialism, the old Communist
British
Party.
Road to Socialism was 1951,
Yeah,
and 1956 was the counter-revolution that took
in
place
Hungary,
in
Hungary.
Hungary.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it, Hungary.
and that was a bit of a turning point. I remember I wrote an article quite a while back for the Class Consciousness Project on the EETPU, the union you mentioned earlier on, and they were dominated at their high end by communists up until 1956, and then things changed, and there was actually a full blown purge of
Yeah, they were. It
communists.
was known that it was a communist trade union.
Yeah,
UCAT was the same though,
yeah,
but
yeah,
mostly UCAT was Trotskyists. That I, for one, Desi Warren was a supporter of Trotsky.
yeah,
Um, Eric Tomlinson, I'd flow with the wind, I think, Ricky, but he
yeah.
just went along with Desi. But yeah, Des died for his,
Yes, he did. Yeah, yeah.
because of it.
He
So I mean, his
mm,
beliefs, fair enough, and there's others, but yeah, you're right. You're probably right. But
yeah.
yeah,
But no, there's a deep rooted anti-communism in the trade union movement. But the other
there
thing
is.
is the second point I wanted to make was we need to be very careful, the pair of us, by not not clubbing in the membership of the trade unions with the wallies at the front at the top of the union.
No, that's
And
yes, I agree. Make
they
that point
because
again.
believe me, they are very different. And there is an absolute chasm between the two.
There
Okay.
is.
The people like Paul Novak, who's basically a trade union bureaucrat and has been for a long time, I don't think he's done a day's work in years. And most of the people at the tops of trade unions haven't done work in years. Um, but they are ingrained in this sort of pro-imperialist position that all trade unionists have got because they are much closer to the ruling class in their positions than workers are. And that's why I think so many unions um, have adopted pro-Ukraine,
It's
pro-Western
hypocrisy,
imperialist
though, isn't it?
positions.
It's fucking rank hypocrisy
Mm,
because he's banning collective bargaining. I think it's for groups for businesses with less than 200 people. Now, if they did that over here, there'd be murder. But there is no collective bargaining generally for people with less than 200, little small. So they don't have a collective bargaining for 8 people working in a sweatshop.
exactly.
So they argue the points about this, and yet their own unions in Britain are as bad and allowed themselves to be as bad as they are treating the unions in the
Mm,
Ukraine, and
yeah.
they don't want to be treated that way. But our two union leaders are quite prepared to accept that people in this country are treated like shit.
Mm,
The
yeah.
Federation of the Trade Union Ukraine, well, there's two of them, isn't there? But that the Federation one, they think they've got about 4,000, was it 4 million members? 4 million. They're like the TUC, but they seem to actually argue on behalf of the unions against the government with regards to certain things. And he
Mm,
just comes along and goes, fuck off, and writes up 9 through a pen if you don't like it. Because what's happened, they've been depleted because they take them all away to fight in the freaking war.
yeah.
So all the shop stewards have gone. Oh, well, let's
Yeah.
get rid of him first. He's a big mouth. Off he goes to the front. never
Yeah,
to be seen again.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
that's where unionism in Ukraine will collapse. And our leaders, and we have said this, and we do point it out every time. And every time I Twitter against union leaders, I always mention it's the grassroots. I think it's mentioned here later on. The grassroots of trade unions in Britain is not the same as the leadership. Once you
No.
get past that convener, shop steward level to a full-time official, that's where the shit starts.
Yes.
Right from
Absolutely.
1926 general strike, where it was the rank and file who forced the leaders to call the strike at the end and was shit on by them. And
Yes.
it has not changed right up to the strike you mentioned about the post office 2 years ago. It has not
Yep.
changed from that day to this, apart from maybe Arthur Scargill in the miners and one or two and in the trains. Eddie, your mate,
Yeah.
dead now. What's his name?
Bob
Bob
Crow.
Crow. So maybe one or two exceptions that I wouldn't
Yeah.
rank in with the rest of the gobshites.
Oh, absolutely.
It makes
Yeah. I
me
mean,
angry, Jason. I'm sorry for swearing, but it, people deserve to have a living in Britain. They deserve, and if they want to be in a union to fight for them against governments, then that's what they should be there for. Not to sell them fucking car insurance or see if they can get a cheap holiday. They want
yes.
me basic human rights, me basic trade union rights is what people want.
Yeah.
Not a minimum wage to live on a pittance and then
Mm,
shoot down the food bank at the weekend to supplement your Sunday dinner. Fuck
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
My
Absolutely.
mum never worked. My dad worked, and so did every other one of my mates' dads worked. There was only one wage coming in.
Yeah. Yep. That's right. That's right. I
Couldn't do it
mean,
now.
well, what you say there about insurance and cheap holidays. What you're talking about there is what's called the servicing model. So
Service
that's the
model, yeah.
model that the trade unions have been adopting probably since the back end of the 80s, I would say. Back the back end of the 1980s, the trade unions kind of gave up with organising. So there were two essential models of trade union
Yeah.
organising. One's the organising model, where you train and empower your reps, your shop stewards, your conveners, and they are the workplace leaders, um, whatever industries they work in, and they are the ones that educate and agitate and organise their members themselves. And then you've gone to what's called the servicing model, which is basically you don't actually organise workers anymore. What you do instead is for in return for their subscriptions, you give them a raft of services, which
Yeah.
include
Load of bollocks.
representation if you get into trouble, if you've got a rep, but also things like discounts on holidays, will writing services, insurance,
So
and
I
all that.
having a discount holiday if you can afford the holiday in the freaking first place.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But of course,
10% discount on a £5,000 holiday. Do me a
that's
favour.
right. And so by replacing the organising model with the servicing model, what they've done is destroyed the biggest means by which they could build class consciousness amongst their
Yeah.
own members.
They should really go on.
They've absolutely shafted themselves by, well, I say they knew exactly what they were doing and they knew what the outcome was going to be. I mean, let's be honest. I say the late 80s because the late 80s was around about the time, 1988, when Jacques Delors made that speech to TUC where he said, "Don't worry, lads, the European Union will protect you.
Yeah.
Thatcher might come after you, but the European Union will protect you." And the unions fell for it.
Yeah.
And we've never
It's
recovered
losing
from
the
it.
name though, isn't there? Really, it's trade union. It's a union of trades, and it's not. It's not. They might as well be called friendly societies
Yes,
or the
exactly.
fucking divvy
Yeah,
club at the weekend
yeah,
or a bingo
yeah,
outing or whatever. Because for
absolutely.
all the good they do in regard to
Yes,
that, but as I say once again, I'd say it again that if that doesn't denigrate the guys on the shop floor who are doing the best for the betterment of their members at the local workplace,
yes,
the grassroots, they're the ones, not the top. Get rid of that layers and start from the bottom.
yeah, absolutely. And I
Don't know
think
how you do it.
any work that's done to transform any union, no matter how big or small, must start from the ground roots. It must
Correct.
start from the bottom. You've got to avoid this Trotskyite approach. Oh, I'll tell you what, we'll get someone we like on the EC. They'll be
Yes.
able to influence change. You can't do sod all at executive level. Trust me, I know. I
Yes,
was
I
there
know.
long enough. You can't change anything at executive level. Change has to come from the bottom.
Yeah.
And unless you're prepared, and it's going to, the long and the short of it, the reason why the Trotskyites go that way by putting people at the top, because it's easy. It's
Yeah, of
easy.
course it is.
Democracy in trade unions is absolutely dead. Okay. Someone I know on an executive of a trade union was elected on a 16% turnout. They didn't win 16% of the vote. They won
No,
it was
no.
a 16% turnout.
Yeah.
And they had to win the majority of
They
that.
won the majority of 16%. Yes.
Exactly. I know of executive committee members who were elected unopposed with a single branch nomination.
Yeah.
That's the reason why Trotskyites aim to put people at the very top, because it's an absolute piece of piss to get there if
Yeah.
you're just ever so slightly organised.
If you're a little bit
just
more
corral
active,
enough
if you
people
go to
together.
more meetings, go to more you know, little pub meetings and get your name out there. That's get on the slate.
Yes, get on the slate, exactly. And the hard job is to talk to workers in their workplaces, talk to workers at the branch meetings.
Yeah.
Be prepared to fall out with people, maybe.
Yeah.
And come
I've
up
done
with
that
views
plenty of
that run
times.
counter to the views of the trade union or the peddled line of the trade union. But try to persuade people to your way of thinking. That's hard. That takes a long time as well. And that's why Trotskyite organisations aren't remotely interested in it. But that's the only way you're going to change a union. You're not going to change it for the better by airdropping people into the bloody executive.
No, because they've got to come from the bottom.
Exactly. But not only that, and I've said this on previous recordings, you have to create a system or a movement within a trade union where people go from the bottom to the top and back down again. It's no good just sending people from the bottom to the top and then them stay there, because when they stay there, they become indoctrinated in the attitudes and the mindsets of the people at the tops of unions. If they come back down again, then they can share their experiences at the top with the people around them and then encourage those to go up and do the same themselves. And what you need is people constantly going up and down in the trade union movement.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not
That's
sticking in any one place.
ideal. But the way that unions work and it is jobs for the boys. Now, if you don't toe the right line, you will never get a full-time officer's job. It's like, I mean, I was branch secretary. It goes to district meetings. The union official said to me, the district officer, he said, "You're a good lad." He said, "But you got to curb this political attitude you've got." I said, "Hey," he said, "you could go far, in the union, you could have my job one day, blah 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 blah." And I was going, "Don't want your job. I represent people on the shop floor. I'm happy doing that." Because I'd seen it, that once you go out of that zone that you've been in, that you've taught yourself, or by reading or by going on courses or whatever, how to be. I don't think you can teach someone how to be a shop steward. It's either they got it or you haven't.
Yeah,
You can teach
I
someone
agree.
how to represent somebody, but to actually do it with passion, I think it's either in you or it isn't. But you can be an adequate representative. It's just being able to bamboozle management really and not be frightened to do it. And I said to him, I don't want to go any further than being a branch secretary, to be honest. I don't want to go on executives with all the expenses bloody pulled out. I didn't want it. It wasn't for me. I was happy. And so were a lot of mine. Now, excuse me, if in those days these sort of things were happening, they would have said, because they weren't elected. A district official in the T&G went to an interview. And if on the interview panel his three mates were on it, he got the fucking job. It's as easy
Yeah,
as that, isn't it?
yeah,
But if you were
yeah.
a communist, and there was one guy who did get a district officer's job, he was a good mate of mine. He was a lot older than me, Ron. He was a wagon driver. But he was a member of the Communist Party, the old Communist Party.
The
And,
CPGB.
hey,
The CPGB.
yeah, the original one that didn't follow the dickhead road to whatever.
Yeah,
Anyway, no, he was all right, Ron. He was a good guy, and he managed to get in the job because nobody else put in for it in the area, for our local area. So he did get it, but he wasn't supported. he'd try and negotiate things that were political, but th they've been told, management, don't agree by whoever high up in the union, in my opinion. And that's where the corruption comes in then.
Yeah.
And it doesn't represent people on the shop
Well,
floor.
well, it's. I mean, going back to what we were saying about the terrible state of democracy in trade unions, it's very right. It actually invites corruption. The
Of
fact
course
that
it
the
does.
turnouts in elections are so poor, and there is such a lack of, I mean, I don't like using the word apathy, but I can't think of a better one to describe it. If you've got an election where 84% of the members didn't bother to vote, I mean, there's only one explanation. They look at the
Yeah.
ballot paper, or they look at open the envelope. Oh, I'm not interested in that. Just stick
No,
it
they
in the
throw it in the
bin.
bin. But
Yeah,
Gav, they're not interested. He's dead
not
right.
interested.
But
Not
you see,
interested.
and the ones that are going to get elected, and they know they will always be nominated by the active branches with the
Yes.
whoever they've got to get them on the slate,
Yep.
as we said, and they'll know. And you can look at a Unite or T&G as it was, um, to get on the executive, and you can see, oh, this guy's got 90 branches nominating him, and this
Yep.
person's only got 4. Oh,
Yep.
it's obviously he's more popular than
That's
him,
it. Exactly.
and that's the
Yeah.
way it
Yeah.
goes.
That's yeah. I mean, I know. I can remember myself voting for someone on the base. Obviously, wasn't as educated in trade unionism then as I am now, but I remember just going for the one that had the most nominations because
Yeah,
they must have
they
liked him
must have
if they
done
all
something
nominated
because
him.
everyone likes him.
They must have thought he was
Yeah,
good. So I
well,
just thought I'll vote
I'm
for him
more
then.
inclined to think, being my cynical point of view, and it has been for a very long time, is that the one with the most is probably the worst one, and the one with the least is probably the guy that's got something to say,
He's the one who
or the
knows what
girl
they're
that's
doing.
got
Yeah,
something to
that's why
say.
they don't want him to stand. Yeah, exactly. Or that's why they didn't nominate him. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And again, to labour the point slightly, but because of the atrophied state of democracy and trade unions, it goes all the way down. It goes all the way down to branch level because, getting a branch nomination at some branches that I have experience of, which is literally two blokes and a dog, it's
yeah,
not difficult. It's not
no,
difficult. And I think you alluded to, you need just to put the right word in the right ears and you
yes,
can get yourself 5, 10, 20, 100 nominations. It's not difficult because the
no, it
branches
isn't.
don't
You just
work
get
effectively.
you get the first of all, your closest mates must attend the meetings, all the meetings. Most people aren't interested. And then people who come to the branch meetings or whatever meetings. I mean, we didn't do it. We did ours by putting notice on the board, anyone to stand. That's the way I did it for my position, branch secretary. Every 2 years it was then, but they've increased. I think it's every 3 or whatever years now. The reason is every 2 years. If you don't do a decent job in 2 years, you're oofed out, or you
Yeah,
should be. And give
yeah,
somebody else a chance to get in there before too much damage has been done.
yeah, exactly.
But
Exactly.
you'll never convince me the same as yourself that the people who are in the grassroots of the union are even put in the same category as the leadership of the unions.
No, no, not at all. In fact, I'd say were it not for the hard work and the sacrifices, I think it's fair to say of the grassroots activist layer, the reps and the
Yeah,
activists. There are people who just like do the right thing for their union. They don't do it to be a rep. They just want to do the right thing for their union. Were
yeah.
it not for them, then God knows what state the trade union movement would be in right now.
Christ
Because frankly,
Almighty.
if if the people at the ground roots were anything like the people at the top, the trade union movement would be absolutely dead now.
Oh, it'd have been dead a long
Absolutely
time ago.
dead.
Think it this that's encroaching on something else. I mean, something about why join a union.
Mm.
It's just that's the last item. I don't know whether we're going to get it all in, but we will.
Well, let's try. So let's move on then to um, something that's been raised. I don't think it's got a lot of purchase, but it's just been something that some people have said in the circles that we move in, Terry, and that's about Marxist trade unions. And well, what's your take on this subject? I mean, all right, I suppose I better set things up, hadn't I? So there have been a number of people in our collective circles who say, right, the whole 2025 modern trade union movement is a write-off. There's no way they can be saved from themselves. That what we need to do, we need to go away and start something ourselves. So what we need is we start our own trade union or trade unions, and we start them from Marxist beginnings. And we want people with a Marxist understanding of the world to be our leaders of these trade unions, our representatives of these trade unions, and hopefully our members of these trade unions eventually as well. And we want them to run counter to the existing trade union, legacy trade unions, I suppose you could call them. We want them to act in opposition to those trade unions. So what's your take? What's your
On
what's your
that, exactly
impression
what
of
you've
that
just
idea?
said, the point that you've just said there, to run alongside, I see. I've got to say, and I know it's comrade locally for me, who puts it out there, and he's a fair enough guy. He says, "Look, I put it out there because I've thought about it for a long time. If it's a no go," he said, "I don't get upset." He said, "At least people will talk about it, and that's all he wants, and that's probably why we can talk about it." But I don't see uh, I don't see a point in it to run because what are you going to have them do? You're going to have them. They've all got to be Marxists. All right, we'll call it communists. When I was a shop steward, I had a communist belief, communist beliefs. I'd read Stalin and the Communist Manifesto and stuff in the 70s. So I had my political views, and it taught me to be fair with people in the union. That's what it did. It taught me fairness and equality between men and women, not just, and even that was before equal pay came in. Um, I do believe we should support all unions, even new ones, if they're forming and if they're in a struggle against an employer. But what would they have the Marxist unions do? Who would they negotiate with? Because if there was a pay deal or something, in what work would they represent? Would anyone be able to be in a Marxist union because they A, were a Marxist, or B, they like the idea of a Marxist or a shop or communist shop steward representing them? But would they work in agriculture? Would they work in shopping? Would they work in would they be care workers? What would they be? And whatever you pick, if it could be anyone, would just be in that union. If if trade unions are that bad that they need to be run by Marxists, then we're on the road to the revolution. Now, if you have the revolution, why do you need Marxist trade unions? Because the trade union would, in my view, would not form what it does now, where it's proactive. It would be a reactive. No, sorry, where it's reactive now. It's not proactive. So it should work in tandem with the revolutionary state
Hmm.
in as a representative of the workers, the same as they do now, but not in conflict. That is not going to happen until you get rid of the capitalist system. Because what you would have is Marxist trade unions representing people within a capitalist system, which is what they say they don't want to do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's. I think you've alluded to it, but it's worth saying. Trade unions are not revolutionary organisations in and of themselves. They are born out of the conflict that capitalism creates between employers and workers, ruling class and working class. So they 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 would not and could not exist in, for sake of argument, a communist society because that conflict does not exist. Um, so there's a difference between Marxists putting themselves where class struggle takes place
Ah,
and talking to workers and saying, right, this is this is the deal. This is how the system works. This is why you're finding yourself in this conflict. This is why you're struggling to pay your bills. This is why you're fighting for more wages. There's a difference between doing that and saying, right, we want to put the whole trade union movement in the bin because we don't like it. It's dead. It's dead on its feet. We need to start something new, but we're going to start it slightly different to what's already gone before. And
Yeah.
you know, I mean, even from a practical level, starting a trade union from scratch is an enormous undertaking. And it's not to say people haven't done it. We've already mentioned the independent workers of Great Britain. We've already mentioned the United Voices of the World. But they were forced to do that. They had to do it. They had no choice because
Mm.
the legacy trade union movement had abandoned them and left them to their fate. And
Yeah.
these were people who were doing very transient work. They were people whose jobs, basically their contract of employment, was an app on their phone. You know, something completely alien to the way the vast majority of workers are organised by their employers is through a
Yeah.
contract. But this contract was an app,
Well,
and
a lot of
the
people. Sorry, you finished that.
no, sorry, go on.
Um, a lot of people don't see this distinction between class. Now, they do see an us and them, as we've said in the past. There is an us and them, and that's what people need to understand. There's an us and them, and that's your class issue. But is it better to convince existing communists to get it to be involved in their trade union and maybe become shop stewards, or friends that you may have who are shop stewards but not communists to try and persuade them to your communist Marxist point of view through training or whatever, which is what used to happen. You know, you would find shop stewards who I knew who were of the communist leaning because they'd studied a few books and they'd seen revolution. They weren't in 1970. We weren't, you know, that far from the Second World War, the end of it, where men were coming back and saying, "You're not going to treat us like you did the last lot, and you're going to get all these concessions gave us." I mean, let's be fair. 45 to when I was born in 53, there's only 8 years in it, so
Mm.
I was right there when all this stuff was coming out. Not that I knew, because I was a young, but that's what I think the way forward would be. Um, and unless anyone, I'm not saying it's not a correct way of looking at it, but unless Comrade Steve, can convince me otherwise, I'll stick with what I've said. That at the moment, I don't think it's it could exist in a capitalist society, and if we didn't have a capitalist society, we wouldn't need them.
Well, I think it's about using what resources you've got to best effect.
Yes, exactly.
You
That's
know,
what I'm saying.
we're
You know,
we're we're, we're associated with a small Marxist-Leninist communist party. It's small in number, so it's starting a trade union from dust is an enormous undertaking. It's arguably too big an undertaking for a party um, as small as ours. Well, the best effect you can get is to go into trade unions, to talk to trade unions, to go to picket lines, talk to workers in struggle.
yes,
You know, you don't have to quote Marx and Lenin chapter and verse to people, but it's
no,
about it's about sharing your knowledge of Marxism, Leninism in a contemporaneous way. So you use
yeah,
modern examples and just talk to people and just
which is
spread
before I'd
spread the
met.
gospel, if you like.
Well, yeah,
You know,
which before I'd met the two lads from Chester. They'd been together going to the Arrow Park Hospital. Nurses were on strike. It's a local hospital between me and Birkenhead, and they've been going there on the picket line talking to the nurses. It's a good response, and they said they'd continue that, but obviously the strike finished. Now they're also looking to doing their own thing in in our area. Now, if you get a chance to go on picket lines, then by all means, that's what you would do. It's what I'm saying. You speak to the shop steward, and maybe you meet up with them, do it as it was in the old days. You have a chat and convince or can talk to them about being. I mean, look at Comrade Georgie. She she's a nurse and she became the rep, and then was trying to get on the exec
yeah.
from a communist point of view.
Hmm.
Then going on as a rep, a communist rep, and then also you can do it the other way. You can have a rep who's not a communist and convince them to follow your line. That way, you would get, if you like, Marxist trade unions because the shop stewards would be of your political persuasion. But other than that, I don't see how they could function outside of capital.
as much as we've been critical about legacy trade unions, and rightly so, they deserve the criticism that they get, not just from us but from other people as well. They are the dog-eared cards that fate has dealt us, and we need to play them. You know, they of course they can get better. They could have better leaders. They could have a greater class consciousness. They could educate their members better. But I think it's far more preferable to interact with the unions as riven with problems and contradictions as they are, than it is to start something new.
Yeah.
To put it all in the bin and try again.
Because
I
it's
think
the grassroots you're after.
yes,
You're after the
that's it.
grassroots.
Yes.
And if you can get them sorting on your side, that's half the battle. You build your membership up, and it will be a membership that are trade union, class conscious, and communistic.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well um it's about educating people about the limitations of trade unionism. And it's not
Yeah,
to do them down, it's not to slag them off. But you look at what happened in 2023, as we mentioned earlier on, and they are examples of the limitations of trade unionism. Trade unionism can get you so far up the road, but it can't get you to your destination. And
no,
to get to your destination, you need to take on Marxism, Leninism. But trade unionism can give you it's a gateway, if you like, to a bigger world and a more interesting and
it's a building of like-minded people.
yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, we are largely where we are now because of trade unionism, aren't we?
Yes,
You know, it's a gateway, but as long as we accept it's got its limitations and it can't be the be all and end all, there's no harm in going into trade unions and talking to people, going to branches, going to picket lines, maybe even talking to people outside their conference halls and things like that. You know, when they have their annual conferences, talk to people outside. It's about starting a conversation, isn't it?
yes, it definitely is.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're
It's building
almost
a
out of time,
network of
Terry.
trade union members who are like-minded politically,
Yes, yes, exactly. And
perhaps.
the solution to their problems does not lie in the Labour Party, and I think more trade unionists now than ever agree with that point of view.
Exactly, and that's the point. You Once people realise that there is no point in voting Labour as opposed to Tory, okay, they're disenfranchised because there's no communist candidates. Maybe they don't vote, but then they push their views. Then because all the vote is for is to be put back in a box for another 4 or 5 years until somebody else cocks up and the other team comes in. Then once they realise that, that's when it's class awareness. Is getting people to see. Like I said earlier, you couldn't get a fucking fag paper between the Labour and the Tories right back in history.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Nothing's changed.
very little clear water between them in the final analysis.
Absolutely.
Very little clear water.
Get
Well,
them to realise that. Get them to realise that
yes,
building unions, building strength through solidarity, and with a class consciousness and scientific socialism.
yes,
How's that
absolutely.
then?
Yeah, so that's very good. Wish I'd thought of that. Wish I thought of
Great
that.
stuff.
All right, so we're almost at the end of our time, Terry. But there's one final point on our agenda. I think we'll make it a little bit of a snappy one. Why join a trade union?
He said. I mean, we've said enough times that once you get past the shop steward level, convener level, the union's a bureaucratic waste of space. And as you've just said, they lead you so far. They'll only lead you so far. Um, maybe the one thing I put, but this one point that I do make is what maybe for us. Maybe the roots of the grass make the roots of the grass strong, and your lawn will flourish.
Very good.
A good little analogy to gardening
Very
there
good. Yeah,
for
absolutely.
comrade Joe Moss. That is with his allotments. If he's listening, get them plants growing, Joe.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and I said earlier on, and we've said before, the general strike came from the workers, not the leaders, and so it shows, and it shows down the decades that the union decline is its leadership and the promise of an ermine coat at the end.
Yeah.
And this kowtowing to the ruling class has to stop somewhere. And that's
Yes.
got to be at the top of the grassroots. Then they've got to realise that I need to be in the union. We need to build a union, but it's for us.
Yes.
It's not for them in executive or making. They can make as many decisions that they want, but if every railway man in the land said, "I don't give a shit what you say. We ain't driving them trains or
Yeah.
fixing
Exactly.
them tracks," or as it was, and Josie's right. In some respects, people have to be prepared to break the law. Now, in Ellesmere Port, on the shutdown site on the old Shell site, all the contractors have been in a row over proper pay for the things. They've shut it down, and all contractors come in and they revamp all the pipework and make sure that everything's okay. And they do that usually for 2 weeks to a month. And so they've ripped them off. So they've just down tools and gone on strike. Down tools. No, didn't phone the union office. Didn't
No.
tell the managers. Fucking didn't go through the gate, and that's it. And the managers are saying, "This is a disgrace. We can't have this. People just down in tools when they want." And this elected representative said, "Why not?" Well, it's against the law. Shrug of shoulders.
Call the
What are you
police
going to do?
then.
What are you going to do about it? If you want your
Call the
refinery
police.
to be working in 3 weeks' time, you best fucking get us back in there.
Yeah,
That's the
exactly.
attitude.
Exactly.
But it's people putting their heads above, and it won't happen again like the Pentonville Five, where they broke the law on secondary picketing, went to jail, were released by the special secret, again, what was he called?
A special
Solicitor.
solicitor or something like that
So,
they'd
yeah,
invented just for that.
they invented him, and then he was dispensed with immediately because they were never going to need him again.
Yeah,
And they were
exactly.
released
Yeah.
because there was a threat of a general strike,
Yeah.
which came from
Yeah.
the rank and file,
It came
not
from the
from the
rank
other
and file.
union leaders.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the best way I could, or the best thing I could say, or the best way I could put what I'm going to say to any would-be trade union member out there, if you're not a member of a trade union, we're not going to sit here and tell you that they're the be-all and end-all.
Correct.
And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they are perfect. They're far from it. They have got many varied flaws. But they are still, today in 2025, the biggest organiser of working class people in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want representation and some level of organisation, and you want to make a difference in your workplace, then you should join a trade union. But more importantly than possibly joining a trade union, what you should do is, like you said about the guys at Ellesmere Port, organise amongst yourselves. Obviously, if the trade union will come with you, then the trade union will come with you and you'll have their support. But where the trade union won't come with you, you just go on your own. Just go on your own. But it's still better, I think, even in 2025, for people to be in a trade union rather than not.
Yes, I'll second that totally.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, okay, you can get sacked, but you need support from your members if you did that. But it's not illegal for an individual to walk out with no ballot. It's illegal if the union backs them walking out with no ballot.
Yeah.
So the actual individual or groups of individuals can turn around and say, "Well, we're not in a union," or "Our union's not listening, so we're not interested. So sod you. We're not bound by the rules of whatever you think we're bound by."
Yeah, exactly.
Takes bottle. That's all it is.
That's it. Yeah. And I think we'll end it there, Terry. Thanks for joining me today. It's been as always, a fascinating discussion on trade unions. I think we could talk all day about them, to be honest. But check out my website. It's middleagedrevolutionaryblog.com. My latest article that's gone up has been about the ever declining birth rate, and try and tackle some of the reasons as to why that might be happening in the West. But also, as I said earlier on in the recording, I've written an article on trade unions and the TUC and their support for Ukraine and their support, therefore, for British and the United States Imperialism. So please have a look at that. As I said, my website is middleagedrevolutionaryblog.com. I'm also on Twitter and I'm on Telegram. But for now, Terry, I'll say thank you for joining me and goodbye.
Thanks for another good meeting, Jason. See you soon.
See you soon.
Bye, mate.